Guys, considering today's firefighters and the way that we do things, we look at this event in 1984 with hindsight bias and think, how could this have happened? Of course, with the Emergency Response Guide app on our phones and the internet and other citable sources, we know better now. However, we aren't necessarily, nor will we ever be out of the woods when it comes to these unknowns. Because typically the first thing someone does when they don't know what to do in an emergency is call 911 and expect firefighters and first responders to show up and know what to do. It's not that far-fetched to say that due to these unknowns, we could easily see a repeat of what happened to Engineer Pierce and his fellow firefighters that day in 1984. Case in point, about a year or so ago in Surprise, Arizona, we had a double near miss with the explosion of a lithium-ion battery storage facility.
That incident was on April 19th, 2019, so less than a year ago.
Surprise, Arizona Fire Department Chief Tom Abbott.
But it was, when you look at the aftermath of what took place, that looked very similar to what transpired in November of 1984 with Chris's dad. Helmets completely ripped off the heads of 4 firefighters. SCBA backpacks broken in several pieces. And this is current technology. Took the packs, broke them. It propelled a company officer from Peoria, which is part, the hazmat group, Engine 193, propelled the captain 73 feet after he went underneath an industrial chain link fence. The engineer wound up 50 feet away from the building. Both had very significant injuries, clavicle scapulas, ribs, bilateral fractures of the ankles, chemical burns on the face, different kinds of burns, and they were fully turned out. They had all their protective clothing on, and that obviously is what saved them. But this was for lack of a better description, a Connex box that was filled with lithium-ion batteries to store power during the day, capture power from photovoltaic systems, and then to put that electricity back into the system in the evenings when peak demand came on. And that's the way of the future. They're all over the country now, and this will only become more prevalent, and especially as people, not only do the utility companies are getting into this, individuals are getting into it. And what, unfortunately I see happening in the future that's going to become the challenge for firefighters is as these different battery systems, and there's all kinds of technologies for the battery. There's flow batteries, mechanical batteries, there's lithium ion, there's regular lithium batteries, but a lithium and a lithium ion battery, totally different chemistries. But there's several different ways of storing energy, but you're going to see a huge increase. Even with the Department of Energy's expectations, by the year 2025, they're going to be exponential growth in sales and use of lithium-ion batteries, especially in residential applications, in addition to just the utility companies, the communications companies, replacing lead-acid technology with lithium-ion. Transportation. There's an electric fire truck out in the market right now. It's relatively expensive right now, but in the future, that cost is going to come down. And so we'll be probably progressing in that direction. But what people don't understand is how the individual cells are put into a battery, then created a module, and then you put several modules together and you get a rack and you get a utility grade system, or just taking one module, putting in somebody's residence to capture electricity from whatever source. And then we have at about 460 degrees Fahrenheit, one of the cells or a couple of the cells can go in what's called thermal runaway and propagate to the cell next to it. And you wind up off-gassing all the different lithium fluoride salts that exist within these cells, and all the different electrolyte solutions which produce flammable vapor. So if you've got something like that in a garage, the battery itself can fail, but it can also have a garage fire for another reason and cause that battery to go into thermal runaway. Now the question is, I shouldn't say normal, but we extinguish the fire through taking a garage attack or however you approach garage fires, you put it out and you have this lithium ion battery sitting on the wall inside the garage. What do you do with it? Whether it's gone through thermal runaway or not, you've got incredible quantities of electricity stored inside that unit. And they're all capable of going through thermal runaway at any point in time. It could be after you put the fire out, it might be 2 hours later, it reignites, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. One of the batteries that were in the site, the Macon site, from what we understand, is transported back to a laboratory in Michigan for forensic analysis to figure out what went wrong, what caused that battery to fail, or that cell, the individual cells. They were transporting one of the cells in the laboratory in Michigan in December, so 9 months later, and it ignited 8-9 months later. So it gives you an indication of what can happen with these things. Now, the question I would ask for the future of the fire service, what are we going to do with these batteries when they fail? Are we going to take a pry bar and pull them off the wall? Are we going to call somebody, and then if so, who? Because we're the ones that are supposedly called to provide a solution. So what do we do with them? How do we approach them? Knowing that you put all that flammable gas off and you fill up a garage with that gas with the door down and fairly tight seal, and it gets in the middle of the flammable range, kind of like the toluene tank incident and that we've been talking about. That finds a source of ignition as it's building up gas, and it's in the middle of the explosive range, and that door comes off. And if you've parked the fire truck right in front of it, in front of that garage, now what? You have firefighters standing out in front of that door. So it's fraught with problems going forward into the future. But how do we address that? How do we develop policies for us MPs to address that battery that's sitting inside the house when it's been through a thermal event? What do we do with it? How do we manage it? We're on a large scale with a utility grade system that we're inevitably going to encounter again. This was just the first time something like that had been documented in the United States, where it exploded and the conditions were just right. We theorize right now, and this is not proven by any stretch of the imagination, but we theorize it was above the upper explosive limit, and it was the vapor, when they opened the door, air came in, and the reduction of, because this event occurred 3 hours after the fact, this explosion took place, that when they opened the door, it potentially went right back down into right in the middle of the flammable range, and there was all kinds of ignition sources inside the facility. It ignited and detonated, and technically it's not a detonation by the true sense of the word, it's a rapid deflagration. But it had enough force to propel an adult male fire captain 73 feet after going underneath a fence and tearing his SCBA harness and the backpack into pieces. And he's in full gear.